Why are people so scared of data?
For some reason, putting numbers in front of people often makes them nervous.
Right.
And I don't care for that. I wish that weren't the case. You put one equation up or one line graph and people kind of shut down.
Today we're going to talk about how to learn from data in the age of AI.
Data is a numerical representation of our world.
A scientist, a stand-up comedian, and a circus performer.
I taught a course at NYU called Data Science for Everyone.
She's been on Ari Shafir's podcast. She's been on Adam Grant's podcast. And she has her own podcast. It's called Behind the Data.
I got into math because I wanted to know if I was right or wrong.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
If you could redesign how we teach data today, what's the first thing you'd change? You know you're the first comedian on the podcast?
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
All right.
Be
I
funny.
think that's exciting. Yeah, I don't know. Well, funny thing happened on my way to record this. Nothing funny happened, in fact.
Okay, let's get into it. In the podcast with Adam Grant, you said, people shouldn't believe scientists blindly, since it makes scientists' job easier. You can read science and see how these decisions are made, and then you can come to a conclusion yourself. Why are people so scared of data?
So I think I have two reactions to that quote, which is one, I agree with it because I did say it. And two, I do want to be clear that I'm not, it almost sounds like I'm saying, disregard whatever science you don't like and come to your own conclusions. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, a lot of times we talk about science as something to either be followed and listened to, or you're skeptical of science and you think the whole thing is corrupt. So it's sort of a yes or no. But really, scientific research is any particular scientific study is tentative. It's an exploration. It's something where we're saying, I have an idea that the world might look like this. Let's do a test and see. And then you can read the results and say, well, do I think that these results speak to the conclusions that they're claiming that they make? Do I think that their methods make sense in terms of, who they got data from and what sort of things that they did? And so I think we can be critical consumers of science, just like we might be critical consumers of art or literature or a history book or something like that. But you raise a good question, which is, for some reason, putting numbers in front of people often makes them nervous.
Right.
And I don't care for that. I wish that weren't the case. So one of the more heartbreaking divides I see in the world, and there are plenty of things to be heartbroken over, but are people who think, oh, I'm not a math person, I'm not a numbers person, therefore, if you're going to talk to me in numbers or charts or visualizations or trends, I don't have anything to say about that, and you just sort of shut down. And I have seen that in front of, plenty of really thoughtful, interested, caring audiences full of experts in all kinds of fields that I'm not an expert in. You put one equation up or one line graph and people kind of shut down.
Right.
And I don't know whether it's the way that we teach math and science in school. I can certainly speak from my own experience that I grew up not thinking I was a math person. I was very nervous around numbers. I thought it wasn't for me. And it wasn't until I went to my PhD program and they forced me to learn this stuff that I was like, oh, you can learn to read this just like you might learn to read like a foreign language or something like that.
Right.
So maybe it's how we're taught, or I think we build in one of the more dangerous ideas I think is out there as well, is the idea of someone being a creative or not. I think all people have the capacity for creativity and the capacity to think numerically. So I think people either they see a number and either assume it's kind of the cold, hard truth.
Right.
And don't question it and say, well, the data says this and the data says that and the numbers speak for themselves, 7, 2, 1. And you think you're speaking about some kind of truth when really a number is just an estimate of something someone chose to write down. Doesn't mean it's not valuable, but it's not something to just follow blindly. But I also get nervous anytime someone says, oh, that's not my world. I can't possibly engage with data or data science, because data is a numerical representation of our world. So if you care about anything in the world, if you're interested in education, if you're interested in health, if you're interested in happiness, whatever it is, someone out there is trying to turn that into a number. And I wish people wouldn't take themselves out of the conversation or feel not welcome in the conversation just because they don't speak numbers as fluently as the other person. I don't know. There's sort of a hierarchy that I think is unfortunate.
I think the way I look at it, there's one part of the audience or humanity, which is scared of math, which is what you started with.
Yeah.
Then there's the other part, which is I love math.
Yeah.
But any number put in front of them, they're like, okay, this must be true.
Right.
Right? There's nothing in the middle, I feel.
That's right. And one of the things I found actually, so I taught a course at NYU. We were talking about this before we started recording. I taught a course at NYU called Data Science for Everyone. I taught like 11 or 12 semesters, and it was hundreds of students each term, and I really loved teaching it.
Yeah.
But one of my biggest surprises, I thought going into it that the biggest challenge would be teaching, so data science for everyone. And so I was like, everyone's going to be there, meaning people with different levels of familiarity with statistics, programming, numbers, research, design. I wasn't sure who would, I mean, it was open to the whole university. And I thought the biggest challenge would be teaching students who were nervous about numbers to engage with them. And I was really prepared to sort of design the course around that. I thought that would be the majority. Surprise number, I guess there's two surprises. Surprise number one, those students didn't even come to the class. Even though we titled it for everyone, and maybe I should have changed it, data science for people who think they're not numbers people or something, right? So I was like, maybe it wasn't everyone. And so there would be a few, and they would require a bit more hand-holding, and I'd say, I would just sort of see, and I went through this myself in my graduate statistics courses, you just get to a problem and you don't know the answer, and you sort of freak out because you just it just makes you feel small and stupid. And so I think it's unfortunate that we don't have resources in place to get people kind of over that and say, if it's okay if you don't understand it, you just kind of keep trying and you work it up. So, okay. But surprise number two was that the actual harder group to teach were the people that you just described, which is, I know about numbers. I've always been good at numbers. I dream in math. I was in the math all-stars, whatever in my high school. And they're really excellent students. They pick up the programming. They pick up the stats. They're great at it. But there's a big part of data science that wrestles with uncertainty, that wrestles with, is this model the right one for this problem I'm trying to make sense of? There's no right or wrong answer. Is this, significance threshold the right threshold? Is this result meaningful when we map it to the real world? And there's no straight up answer for those things. If you think of, they would say, well, is this coefficient big enough? Or is this number of errors in my model too many? And there's no answer. Literally, the question depends on, well, how much uncertainty are you okay with? Are you okay with this potentially being wrong? How do you weigh your trade-off between generalizability versus exactness? And they really struggled with that because you're used to working with numbers and being in at least a classroom setting where there's a right and a wrong answer. But with data science, there is no right or wrong answer. We're doing the best we can to turn something we care about into some numbers and then do some math or some computation to make sense of those numbers in some way. But at every step, we're making choices about like, how am I going to measure this? What model am I going to use? How am I going to interpret these results? Which of these 200 possible results is the one worth telling other people about? Like those are ethical, philosophical, research, expertise-based questions that my math students really struggled with because I think they weren't used to being in situations where there was no, the answer is it depends and what do you think, which is not something you're used to.
Quite surprising though. Like the math students suffered. Like I would think the opposite suffered.
Everyone suffered a little. Don't worry. I'm an equal opportunity suffering imposer in my classes, but generally speaking, I think maybe the suffering. I'm speaking with a little bit of bias myself because I was surprised by this, whereas I wasn't surprised by the students who found the numbers intimidating. I was surprised there weren't that many of those students. I was hoping that more of them would take that class. And so that's, I think, on me for not doing a better job of reaching out to kind of the non-quantitative fields. I mean, so for example, this is a small aside, but I was just thinking about this earlier. One of the last semesters I taught at NYU was in this big lecture hall. And right before my class, there was a course on sociology. And I would, kind of show up towards the end of the class and I would sort of see the end of the lecture as the professor was wrapping up. And then as I was walking in, I would overhear the professor speaking with students after class about questions. And so it was all these interesting questions about like, economic trends and community trends and what it means to live in a society and how people choose where to live and how to live and all this stuff. And then I would watch all of these 200 students from this sociology class walk out of the room. And I remember thinking, why aren't they staying for my class? Like we can use numbers to help answer those questions. I'm not saying you need numbers to answer those questions, but I'm saying that there's room for that. And so I was like, where are they going? So part of my lack of surprise, I guess, was I was sort of expecting more students from the maybe subject matter expertise with less math skills. But I think part of the surprise for my math students, and I'm oversimplifying, is that I think they came to the class expecting it to be another exercise in certainty and in right and wrong. Yeah. Whereas it's not. And so at least the students who were coming from a not so quantitative background knew when they were signing up for a course called data science that probably they'd have to work with data. And so it's hard, but not shocking. Whereas I remember my students, it just being, and this is not all students, this is the ones who came to my office hours, or who I would work with, and so that's not everybody, but it just felt like they felt like a promise had been broken. Like I got into math because I wanted to know if I was right or wrong.
Right.
But data is much messier than that. There's no right answer. Did this trend go up enough to be interesting? I don't know. Do you think it went up enough to be interesting? Like, unless it's a flat line, and even that is, maybe that's interesting.
Right.
Right? It's the math piece of it, the precision is only a very teeny tiny part of applying it to the rest of the world and making sense of it. And
No,
so
I like
yeah.
what you said there. And I that brings me to my next
Okay,
question,
great.
actually.
Yeah.
It says that how do we make data feel more human and like less technical?
It's a really big question, and I don't know the answer. However, my ways in, I have two ways in. One that I maybe spend more time on than the other. The first one is I like to remind people that data exists because humans decided to track something. There's an assumption out there, especially when we started talking about data science and AI as this sort of just information that's kind of out there in the ether that we can track and learn from. And maybe to an extent that's true, but it's out there in the ether or in the cloud or whatever because some human said we should pay attention to that and we should pay attention to that. Or they said we should pay attention to those things because those are the things we know how to track, right? So I can wear an Aura ring or an Apple Watch and track my steps and track my pulse and track some other things because someone thought it was important or because that just happens to be what's easier to track if you're wearing something on your wrist or your hand. Okay. But someone had to say, let's track those things. And so one way into data and data science, I think when we think about working with data, we tend to think, statistics, machine learning, predictive modeling, analytics, and complicated tables and all of this. And that stuff's great. But if you're brand new to that world, it can get very overwhelming very fast. One way into data that I encourage folks both in my classes and in corporate world and nonprofits where I do a lot of work these days to say, think about how people have turned the thing you care about, whether it's student learning, workplace engagement, customer satisfaction, like whatever it is that you're trying to track or better understand, talk to the people who are turning that into data. Because they're probably making some assumptions or they're probably working with a very limited perspective, not out of malice, but just because if your focus is data, you're just working with what you have. All right, I know what my customers clicked on. I know what they put in their cart and then removed, but I don't know all kinds of other things, but I don't have that data, so I'm not going to think about it. If you're someone who works with customers on a daily basis, you have an experience in retail, you think about, customer interactions at stores, work with those people and say, here's what I think really matters. And then they can kind of help you think about how to turn that into data. In other words, the measurement process, like the transformation of a thing we care about, happiness, success, longevity, the process of turning that into a number is a very creative and expertise heavy process that I think most of us skip. I think usually we think data's not my world, so I'm going to live over here. And then we have data scientists, and I'm guilty of this, saying, yeah, I know how data works. I'll just take a couple of numbers and do something interesting. But am I working with the right numbers in the first place? And I think that's where people who have some kind of subject matter expertise, to make this more concrete, as a professor, companies were constantly contacting me to say, I have a brand new learning analytics software for you to use. If you install this thing and subscribe to our service, you're going to learn.
Can we make it an example?
Yeah, this is an example. Right. Yeah. So I'll get an email that says, we have this brand new software for you so you can better understand student learning.
Okay.
And I'll say, okay. And I do want to understand student learning. I want to know if what I'm saying to students and what I'm having them do in their homework makes sense. They will say, okay, this software offers all kinds of things like telling you how long a student spends on your course website, what sorts of things they click on, how long they watch the videos, whether they download the videos, whether they open the reading, and you can get all these metrics about what the student did on your website if you install our package or whatever. And I can do that, but is that really telling me that students learned anything? It might just tell me it tells me a little bit about who's engaging with the course, like maybe someone doesn't even log in and that's some information. But knowing that someone downloaded the video, I don't know if that tells me anything about whether they actually watched it Or if it shows me that someone watched it online, I don't know if they pressed play and walked out of the room.
Right.
And even if they watched it or downloaded it and watched it, I don't know if it landed with them. So what I've gotten information on, I've been promised data about student learning, but I've been given data that in my mind is actually about student engagement with the online material, which is kind of clicking and looking and typing. And so I don't think that answered the question I actually care about, which is student learning. And so if someone who was actually a teacher worked with the folks creating that software, maybe we could get better data about student learning.
Right.
So it's a very human process in the sense that you have to answer deep questions like, what does it mean for my students to learn?
Right.
And in order to get real data on that, like you have to really engage with, well, how do I know if my students have learned something?
Right.
Well, I know if they've learned something if I give them a question and they're able to answer it organically, or they come to me and they start at saying, hey, I thought about the course material when I was out with my friends and they said this other thing. And so I have my own clues. And what I would really love is some data that tells me about that. And I don't think that exists. If it does and someone's watching this, send it my way.
No, I like it because like a lot of CEOs and all these companies that you just gave an example, they're going to come at you and they'll be like, we're data driven.
Exactly.
But what are you putting there?
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't make sense. You don't have the context. You don't have the empathy of like a human being.
Yeah.
Those things matter. And even the factor like how much time someone's spending, like the example you gave, how much time they're spending on it.
Yeah.
At the risk of sounding like an ass, that kid could be just dumb. He's spending 10 hours.
Why is he watching this so many times?
Versus like a kid who got it in one go in 1 hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think we're going to penalize the kid who got it in 1 hour just because he got it?
Exactly. And I see companies do this a lot. So I do a fair amount of work with companies who try to say, well, we want to measure things like performance in the workplace. And if anyone's ever worked at a corporation and had a performance review, I would imagine you've had an experience where you're thinking, I'm not sure they're measuring what I'm actually bringing to this company. And a lot of times we see companies say, I'm going to measure how many lines of code did they write? Right. Oh, they wrote more, therefore they're more productive. Well, first of all, more lines of code is often worse code. And I know that because I've written plenty of long programs that could have been shorter if I had taken some time to do it more elegantly. And second of all, you can write 2 lines that solves a massive problem no one thought of.
Right.
Or you could write 200 lines, even if it's perfectly elegant, that solves a problem that doesn't really matter. And so I just think that we have, because of this gap, I think we're throwing data that isn't so meaningful at a lot of problems and thinking we're getting answers. And we're also not really actually answering or solving or even asking questions about the things that really matter, because a lot of people who think about that stuff think they have nothing to say about data. And a lot of the people with data, again, mean well, but don't have the subject matter expertise. I can give you another example if you want from the workplace.
Let's go for it.
Yeah. So I worked with a company that said, we want to use data to predict when high performing talent are going to leave. And this was like a big global Fortune 500, whatever that you've heard of. And they said, we want to know if someone who's like a top performer, like a great talent, if they're likely to leave, and we want to know that ahead of time so that we can do something to keep them from leaving. So basically they wanted to limit what they called regrettable exits.
Right.
Which on the one hand, that's nice, I guess. On the other, immediately should raise some flags where it's like, you're going to stalk your employees and see if they're looking at other websites and then somehow intervene. So you're like, okay, but suppose you're going to...
So that was the way they wanted to do it?
Not quite. They weren't quite able to do that. They're not tracking websites. So what they said was they wanted to know, what are the factors that predict a high-performing person leaving based on their own internal data. So they weren't tracking what anyone is looking at, but it's still creepy. But they were saying, okay, because you're like, I don't know. It's sort of like, well, I was going to give an example, but maybe it's too political. It's like health insurance where they like kind of track if you're likely to die. And anyway, we don't do that. All right. So there's the tracking boys. And they found out that employees who left were largely leaving because the salary at other companies was higher.
Right. Everyone wants money.
Yeah. And so on the one hand, you're like, I wasn't part of this. I was sort of briefed on this other project that they had done. They were like, yes, we use data for everything. Let me tell you about this great project. And I was like, that was your finding? I was like, you spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars hiring an external data science team to find out that people left because another company offered them higher pay. I was like, I could have probably told you that, but okay, you want to cross your T's and dot your I's. Great. Then they started telling me more about it. And it turned out that model, the people who had built it, who are not in the company, the external experts in data science, and it was a perfectly sound model on its own, we're not told that the primary form of compensation at this company is the annual bonus at the end of the year.
Right.
And so if you include the annual bonus at the end of the year, the effect of income of pay completely goes away.
Oh, so they didn't even account for it.
So they didn't even account for it.
Okay.
And so that's a simple example where all that research and the model was correct given the data that they had, but because no one bothered to say, by the way, most of our compensation comes in one lump sum every December or January, the model was like, yeah, they make no money here and they make a ton of money over there, so everything else goes away. And they'd already like let the team go and they were done. And so they had this whole project that was completely useless because no one was in the room who offered any kind of subject matter expertise about how the company actually worked.
They missed out on that column in the table.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not their fault. They did it perfectly because they were just given a bunch of data and the data happened to not include that because
looking at it, I think it's their fault.
Well, sure. I'm not trying to name names. I'm just trying to say that subject matter experts and data people need to talk. The other way that you can humanize data, I think you can do really thoughtful things with data visualization. I think that's another way in to like tell stories with data that make it more personal.
Right. But you also said this, I think, in Adam's podcast. You said that the people who are not technical should be going and doing this part because they already have this component with them.
Exactly.
And once they learn all these numbers and stuff, it makes more sense to them.
Exactly.
They have the domain knowledge.
Exactly. I think domain knowledge, for some reason, we think of it as somehow lesser than technical knowledge.
Right.
And both are very, very valuable. Another example, I go to a lot of companies and they say, we have all these results about our employees are miserable. Here's the data. Will you go through the data with like more of a fine tooth comb and tell me why you think our employees are miserable? And I'll say, yeah, I'm happy to, and I can look for stuff. But I'll say, before I do that, why don't you, just a person who works here, who is not a data, you're like an HR person, but you talk with all kinds of employees. I was like, why don't you just tell me what your gut instincts are for why people are unhappy? And usually they'll say all kinds of thoughtful things like, people feel like they're not valued, or they're hired for one thing and they end up doing something else, or they feel like they're in a lot of meetings and there's a lot of busy work and and all these interesting, thoughtful things. They might be right, they might be wrong, but it's things I would never think of as an outsider. I mean, maybe I could name some generic ones having read, Harvard Business Review, but they name all this thoughtful stuff. And I'll say, okay, well, let me check in the data to see if those trends exist. And there is no data on that stuff. So you can't test it. So all I can test are these very simple things because the data is quite limited. So I think there's this mismatch where we have all this data about stuff that's easier to measure that isn't actually that meaningful. And all this other stuff that we could be measuring but aren't because it's harder to measure. It's sort of like we have lots and lots of measures about economic growth and very, very few measures about mental health and economic and emotional well-being. And part of that is because it's really easy to track prices and it's really hard to track mental wellness.
Right.
But we could get better at it if people who spend their lives thinking about mental health could feel comfortable speaking with people who work with data. And I just don't see enough of that. I'm not saying it's not happening. I just think that that's a massive gap.
I think even Apple I could be super wrong about this, but Apple is like doing mood analysis or something, right, on the phones right now. And it'd be an interesting thing, like how if someone's sad or something. I think even ChatGPT is like I think it was like 1.2 million people a day that they're like suicidal, the way they talk, it's reported. So they are kind of getting there.
They're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but then you also run up against some privacy issues. So I remember early on with social media, with like Twitter, there was some talk about like, oh, could we predict a mental health crisis in someone if we could, track their posts online or their, because people share all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so there was like, oh yeah, we could probably see if someone is getting really unwell and then intervene. But there's this kind of question mark around kind of the ethics of, are you just spying on somebody at that point?
There's no way to win.
Yeah. But that's where we need people who understand ethics and patient privacy rights and like all that kind of stuff. I work every now and again with like a law firms, and lawyers are among the smartest people I know. And they're among the first to freak out if I mention numbers. And it's like, we need lawyers who understand. I'm again not saying these people don't exist, but by and large, people usually say, oh, I went to law school, so I wouldn't have to talk about numbers. And it's like, well, so much is happening online and we're turning a lot of that into data and a lot of it has legal implications. So You're going to have to get used to it.
I think when you put a number to something, it just makes more sense to someone who likes numbers.
Yeah,
But to someone who doesn't, they just shut their brain off.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this new upcoming technology? It's really new. No one's ever heard of it. It's called AI.
Oh, I hear it's a dream of science fiction. I think one day we might be able to have a conversation with our telephones. Yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So according to Tech Radar, which is a website for data, again, 1 in 6 US workers say they lie about using AI at work just to look with it.
Mm.
Are we mistaking AI access for actual understanding?
Actual understanding of AI?
Or just like people are pretending to work with AI
Yeah.
without like they're using it the same way Google
Yeah.
would use Google.
Yes, I think this actually goes back to the teaching example, the teaching data, where just because someone is using AI to do something doesn't mean that they are using it to its full capacity, that they're using it in a way that makes sense for what they're trying to do, or that they're using it, in a way that's above and beyond some other tool that they could be using, like Excel or Google or something like that. Like if you're using, ChatGPT to look up recipes, you could probably use Google for that. And so I don't know that you're using AI. And I do think that it's true that every employer is basically saying, you all need to learn AI. Here's 1,000 tools. And so I am not surprised at all that there's evidence of a response bias, that people are saying they're using it when they're not.
Yeah, I'm also like a lot of the way you explain the recipe thing.
Yeah.
It's like whatever Google did before was PageRank.
Yeah.
You're just getting whatever Google did.
Yeah.
You're not going through the websites. Now it's just like a level of laziness that's coming.
Someone's just summarizing Google for you, which is
exactly.
largely what
so
happens.
How do you use it properly then?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways it's exciting because there is no proper way to use it. And in some ways it reminds me of data science maybe 10, 15 years ago when no one knew what it was. And so data science meant anything from I write my grocery list in Excel or I'm building a robot. Like it could mean, and I think AI is the same thing. It's like, I use AI all the time. It's like, am I using AI to respond to emails or am I using AI to, test 1,000 iterations of a drug that I'm repurposing to cure cancer? And you're like, I think that one sounds more like AI to me, but there's no rules around it. So in some ways, if I'm using AI to make a picture for my kid's birthday party, then am I an AI engineer now? Am I a prompt engineer? It's sort of like when social media roles started cropping up at companies as well. They're like, we need a social media manager. And it was just like anyone who'd ever used Facebook could get a job as like the CEO of social media at their company, whatever. So I think we're in a world where there is no proper way to use AI. There's maybe a few improper ways, but that's both kind of fun and also means there's a lot of noise around like, oh, yes, I do AI, or oh, no, I don't do AI.
I know what you're saying because I spoke to this guy who was building something and he's like, I'm going to make this company and it's called something.ai. I'm like, dude, what is the AI part of this? He's like, no, everyone's just putting it.
Yeah.
It's going to make it look like a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, and again, this is the same thing happened with data science where people would say, well, with our new data-driven machine learning, deep learning algorithm, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're running a regression and showing me a pie chart somehow at the end of it. None of this is machine learning or it's not the machine learning that you're evoking.
Right.
And so, something could be AI powered if, the employees write to each other or use AI to respond to customer inquiries. You're like, this is our AI powered health services. And you're like, this is not AI powered. So I take it all with 1,000 grains of salt, perhaps.
Yeah.
I would say the vast majority of things that are .ai are probably not AI in the sense that it's almost like, oh, I use Google for my company.
Yeah.
Like, oh, good. Yeah,
it's the new buzzword is what I feel.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think that AI can help us think more creatively and not just faster?
It's a good question. I am hopeful that it can, but I worry that it won't. How's that for a non-answer?
That's a good answer because I could explain what I understood from that.
Okay.
Is that you're getting information so quick.
Yeah.
And so effortlessly that you're not putting that effort that you require to. I mean, let's take an example, right?
Yeah.
Today, if I want to print a birthday card for my kid, the way you explained it, I don't have any kids, But
I don't either. I don't know why I use such a creepy example.
No.
I'm making all these birthday cards for kids that don't exist. That's what I use AI for, is for my imaginary children. Yeah.
So if you make it for that, you're just like outsourcing that part to AI where you're like, make the card.
Mm-hmm.
But then what is the creative part that you can do with it? If you had to think, like if we had to brainstorm right now,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I mean, I guess the optimistic version is I would say, oh, I really want to I'll do something concrete. So my brother has a wonderful dog named Tula. And a couple years ago, I wanted to make him a poster that was, I feel like you'll appreciate this in particular. It was a poster that was a picture of his dog with the Gandalf quote from Lord of the Rings that says, what's the famous one? It's like, I wish I hadn't been born during this time. And Frodo says that. And then Gandalf says, all we can do is the best we have with the time we have. Whatever.
Okay.
I got that all wrong, but you can look it up. It's a lovely quote. And so I was going to put this Gandalf quote on this picture of this dog. And I tried on, I was like on Photoshop or Canva or something, and I just couldn't get it right. And then obviously figuring out how to print it is its own problem. But it just looked very homemade. So I could imagine a version where I try again using AI and I say, here's a picture of this dog, here's a picture of this, or here's the quote that I really like show me 10 versions where you put it together and one is kind of a futuristic and one is philosophical and one is this. And so the creative part is me imagining the different ways this could look and then choosing among them. And then I ultimately might have something. Whereas 2 years ago, I thought it just looked like a child made a scrapbook, and so I never went anywhere. So in some ways, was I even being creative? If you define it as creating, then no, because I didn't even end up using the thing.
Right.
So maybe. On the other hand, even as I say that, I think, gosh, what's lost, kind of to your point, what's lost in the process of me figuring out all the different ways that this could go? Like an analogy that's coming to mind as we're talking about this is like, if you do a crossword puzzle, the fun is filling it in and struggling with not knowing what goes where and then feeling good when you get it. Why would I just get a finished crossword puzzle to look at?
Right.
That's like what a lot of the AI stuff is offering. And so even with this thing with my brother, the example of like the gift for my brother, which sorry, I never gave to you, is like, just because I made this thing, was it creative? Did I get anything out of making it? If I could just say, oh, make this and write it down. I don't know. I mean, maybe I would, by virtue of doing this iterative thing with the computer, I would come up with some wild and crazy, like, this is the dog in outer space, and here's the quote. Like, all this stuff I would never think of, but I'm skeptical. Because I think with what you're saying, like the friction and the struggling with making something and being like, this looks terrible. Why does it look terrible? How can I make it better? Like, I think losing that feels like it would make me less creative, but I guess maybe I'll go make the card and I'll report back. I don't know.
But I feel like real creativity. Have you seen the Sora videos that keep coming out?
Yes.
That's creativity.
Yeah.
I think those prompts are like really creative.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
Proper brain rot.
Yeah.
But I think there's
Yeah.
a level of creativity that comes from it.
I was at a conference and I can't remember who said it or really what they said, but I'm going to try to paraphrase it anyway. I was at a conference not too long ago where they're talking about AI and someone who is a filmmaker who's maybe in his 50s, 60s, shared that, over the course of his time as a filmmaker, it got easier to work with various tools. It used to be that the cameras were really hard to learn, and they're still difficult to learn if you're working with a really complicated one. But he was like, cameras got better and better. I stopped having to fuss with like focusing because it would be automatic, and then and then it was digital instead of film. And then editing software used to be very manual, and now it's this, and it's getting better. And he was like, all along, as the tools have gotten sharper, I haven't felt like, oh, I'm losing my creativity. I just no longer have to worry about the focus or the light because it's kind of automated and I can focus on what I'm trying to film. And he was like, and I don't know why it is that today when I am confronted with Sora or the ability to take a little bit of footage and then have AI stretch it into a 15-minute, whatever, he was like, I don't know why I feel like that is a line that's too far. And he was like, who am I to say to the next generation of filmmakers that this level of ease is suddenly not okay? All the ease that I enjoyed along the way was okay, and now this is too much? He was like, I don't know. He was like, I both feel that this is bad for creativity and that maybe an aspiring filmmaker who doesn't have a camera, doesn't have a set, doesn't have actors, could actually make something really beautiful with the right prompts, in a village somewhere. Why would I deprive them of that because I think we've now made it too easy. And I don't have an answer for it. I don't think any of us have answers for that.
Nobody has an answer for that.
Yeah.
I think it's like, then it comes back down to the thing where like you can write and then you can have anything visualized because like as humans, we can like process things visually quicker.
Yeah.
So now it comes down to the writing then. Like the creativity comes down to that part of it.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, something I noticed too, speaking of writing, is I don't really use, and maybe I should, I don't really use AI to write things like outright. Like writing is a big way that I make sense of the world, and whether it's an email to a friend or a write-up of some data, like the process of writing it out, maybe I'm just old school, but the process of writing it out is like how I make sense of it. And so I feel the rare occasion when I'll use it to like make a bio for myself, because I hate talking about myself. Not my website, really. I did write it, but
it's a really good website. You guys
I really did write the website, but everything like a speaker's bio. Andrea is a blah, 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 like ChatGPT wrote that. Once it said I was the director of a center that I'm not the director of, and I was like, leave it in. That's great. But I do use it for coding all of the time.
Right.
And I don't even have a shred of a feeling like, oh, I'm missing something deep about the friction of coding and yada, yada, yada. I was just like, the minute I realized I didn't have to live my life on Stack Overflow,
right.
I was like, great, we're done with that. Like, let's go. Give me the code for even things I know the code for. I don't even have to think about it. Just give me the code for this and tell me how to do that. And then write it so it does this. And I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just me with my own biases being like precious about the art of writing, and I'm less precious about the art of coding, and so it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So we might see that where it's like sort of in different domains, we'll see people. I'm fine with it in some areas. Yeah, design a recipe using whatever. I don't care because I don't write recipes and I don't cook. I'm not threatened by it, I guess is maybe a way to think about it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And my thought is this is not going away because imagine like, I think it was someone who said it. Obviously someone said it.
Someone said it.
I don't remember who. But he said, or she said that you go to like, if you see two computers playing chess, right? You're not that interested.
Yeah.
Versus if you go for like two people playing chess.
Yeah.
You like the human element of it.
Yeah.
Versus if you go for a football match, like where like the American word is soccer.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Or even the other one.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of robots playing, unless they're like mauling each other to like literally destruction, no one's gonna go watch it because it's too perfect. The human element and the human skill of it is what people want to go for.
That's right.
So it feels like this sort of entertainment can go away.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, have you seen those videos of those dogs sitting and having like a podcast?
No.
On Instagram?
No, but that sounds amazing.
That shit is hilarious.
Oh, wow.
It is so much fun to watch it. So I'm like, at one point I'm saying I don't want to watch it, but at this other part of it, it's like, it's funny.
Yeah.
And it's good. I don't know how it's going to take off.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
I mean, this is reminding me of something that a friend of mine, Steve Novella, to give him some credit, shared early on. He was an early adopter. He has a podcast about science and all these things. And he's been talking in a very optimistic way about AI. And so I always like talking to him because it makes me feel a little bit better. It's easy to get very negative about this stuff. And I think there are real issues. But one of the things he said is he was like, look, the invention of the camera didn't make painting go away. You could argue that it made painting less common or less profitable or more rare or whatever, but we still admire a good painting. People pay a ton of money for paintings. There's still, art everywhere. And so you can have, it's just like video and movies didn't make theater go away. Again, it probably made it a little bit harder, but there is a world where these things can be complements, where we can both want to see a human performing a dramatic scene in a movie and watch, I guess, AI-generated dogs have a podcast. Like, that sounds great.
It's really funny.
I'm upset I'm not a dog in this podcast right now.
We could do something.
Fix it.
DJ.
Yeah, make us dogs.
Okay, I think this is something that you'd be. Let's leave it. Would you be pissed or would you appreciate it? 90% of jokes generated by LLMs were just 25 repeated jokes.
Oh.
Yeah. Are you happy about that?
Yeah. I'm relieved because for a long time I thought, at least no one will come for comedy because you can't, how could a machine be funny?
It's not. I mean, I've tried ChatGPT and it's annoying. I'm not like saying, hey, tell me a joke.
Yeah.
But I don't think it can be funny.
I've never engaged with it with the goal of being amused. Like I'll go for information or like help me talk through this thing, help me make sure that I'm right about this, and but I've never been like, haha, that was funny. Like never.
Do you use it to write your own jokes?
I do not.
Okay.
But I do know people who do. And they'll say they use it as a kind of workshopping partner. I mean, who knows what they're actually doing, but they'll say, here's a bit that I'm thinking about, what do you think? And my skepticism, and I'm sure I could prompt engineer my way out of this, is that way too often ChatGPT thinks that I'm like a genius, which, most of the time I enjoy, but has gotten me into trouble. And so I think for comedy, they're like, this is hilarious. And you just go up and bomb. Like, I don't think so.
Right.
But I do know comics who use it, and the kind of dialogue way is how I would use it if I needed to.
Are they funny? That's my answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're a data scientist, you're a comedian. How do these worlds connect?
It's a good question. And I think one way they connect is that, and I'm not saying that I do this, but I think really, really good comedy and really, really good data science is the same thing. I think it's about looking at a world that all of us see and seeing something that other people haven't noticed, looking at it from a fresh angle and a new way, noticing like, why are we all doing this thing? And everyone else just walks around, doesn't even pause to notice, why are we doing this way? And then takes that observation and drills it down to something very, 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 very precise. Mm-hmm. And the joke is the outcome of the precision, is the precise thing in comedy. And the column of data, the column of numbers that represent, oh yeah, why does everyone who walks into this store, I don't know why I have all these retail examples today, but the column of data or the data set or the new algorithm is the precise manifestation of that. So I think both are very, very, at their best, very keen observers of the world who then turn that interesting observation into something very precise.
Mm. What I really liked about, again, I love that podcast of yours with Adam Grant. You said that education, even when you talked about education and comedy, you said that there's like a suspense that comes with comedy.
Yeah.
And with education, you said the whole example about like an abstract.
Yeah.
It has pretty much everything.
Yeah.
There's no suspense.
Yeah.
Like when I go to like the Comedy Cellar or something.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there because I know whatever he's saying or she's saying, there's going to be a point where something's going to flip.
Right.
I'm waiting for that flip.
And if it doesn't, you're real upset.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you throw the tomatoes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
So with the abstract, it's just boring, right?
So one of the things, that was something that Adam suggested. He was like, abstract should be suspenseful. They should just list the question and the methods, and you have to read the paper to find out, did it work? Because otherwise in science, you lead with the punchline, which is basically,
state of the art.
It didn't work, or it did, or usually they only published it if it did work, which is its own problem. But one of the things that I try to do when I talk about data, particularly to non-technical audiences, and every now and again I wander into technical audiences to talk about how they can better communicate their work with non-data scientists, because I think it's our responsibility. If we have a facility with numbers, it's our responsibility to make sure that others are understanding them. Otherwise, why are we doing this? Just to impress each other, unfortunately, often, but that shouldn't be, right? And so one of the things that I am playing with, and I tend to recommend, is too often with data science, we like to roll out with like, I did all this work, but I'm just gonna show you the cool chart that came at the end of it. And like the really cool visualization or the really cool graphic of the result. And it might be cool and it might be interesting, but if you leave out the entire process of how you got to it, that kind of goes back to where we started this conversation, which is like, you should really try to invite people in on the whole process. The reason this chart exists is because I was looking at the world, I was looking at my students, I was looking at my customers, I was looking at my employees, I was looking at people and saying, why is this the outcome? Why aren't we doing it this way? Why isn't it better? Why aren't students learning more? And then I said, well, what if I did it this way? And then I probably tried a bunch of stuff that didn't work. And then I found one that was promising, and then I explored that, and then I collected more data, and then I did another study, and then I did this. And that's finally what you're gonna see as this chart at the very end. So the chart at the very end is like the satisfying conclusion of the movie. And way too often when we talk about data or you go to like look up, infographics online, it just starts with the chart. And I'm guilty of this. It starts with the chart and is like, ta-da, isn't this interesting? And if you don't set up why it's interesting, people don't realize why it's interesting. Let me be more concrete. I'm watching Slow Horses. Do you know the show? It's like a spy thriller show set in London. But it's like you watch any suspenseful movie or any suspenseful like whodunit or whatever. It's like what we do in data science, leading with the cool graphic that summarizes our results, is like just coming to the end of like a Sherlock Holmes episode and being like, he was the killer. Without inviting you into like, here was the evidence and here's what we saw and here's why the facts didn't line up and here's why we went back to this person. And like the whole mystery of it goes away. And I think if we can invite people into the mystery, and this goes back to what I was saying about my students as well, is like, no wonder they thought there would be yes, no, right or wrong answers, is because what you see are these like overly certain looking charts. This went up and this went down and this was the result of our intervention, da da da. But the reason we have that chart is because a long time ago, someone said, hold on, I don't think we understand this problem the right way. Like, let's think about it. Let's do this. Let's do that. And we obscure that part of the process to try to seem more, I don't know, correct and all-knowing, when really we've kind of muddled our way through. And so I try to, when I talk about data, say like, I'm going to show you some charts, but before we get to that, here's why this chart is actually important. Here's why it was hard to get. And here's why it conveys something that you don't already know. And then you show it. So whether you call it suspense or just inviting people into the process, like I think that can be one way to kind of humanize, but also, I don't know, give a little bit more texture to why the numbers are the way that they are.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not a master storyteller or you know, I'm not trying to do like M. Night Shyamalan. How do you say his last name? Shyamalan? Whatever that.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm not trying to do like a I see dead people sort of twist, but you know, you can build up some kind of like a slick graphic should be the punchline. It shouldn't be what you start with.
Yeah. Basically how we're going to package this episode.
There you go.
So you've already told me about this, but I think maybe we could keep it or not.
Okay.
But if you could redesign how we teach today, teach data today, what's the first thing you'd change?
The first thing, I would, at some point in like K through 12 education, I'm going to make it up, I'm going to say 4th grade, I would somehow build something into the curriculum that uses numbers in a way that applies to a real problem that students care about. And I don't mean like a word problem, like 2 trains are going at whatever speed. What time did the, you know, not like that kind of stuff to just have words in a problem for the sake of it. But like, whether it's a class project or a class itself or an extracurricular, like something where students are like saying, hey, here's a thing I care about. I'm going to try to study this with numbers and walk through that process. I think, at least in my education, and maybe, I don't know if this was true for yours, it was like I would learn literature and I would learn history and I would learn whatever, languages, Spanish. And then I would go to math class and I would go to science where I'd dissect a frog and I didn't know why we had to do it and it was gross. And we'd have to learn the scientific method and that was boring. And then we'd have to learn like algebra. And somewhere there should be more of an overlap. And I don't know what that class is. Maybe it's just called data science, but maybe it's called numbers in real life, or we'll get someone who can brand it better.
Okay. So you've lived in Shanghai, you've lived in New York. You say that your love for New York is a lot more than Shanghai. Is that true? Because that would be the right answer, but
it would be the right answer. I prefer to live in New York. I was living in Shanghai first, and I moved here, and I've been here longer than I was in Shanghai. But I think Shanghai is a fantastic city, and I would strongly consider living there again. But the comedy, the walkability, the energy of New York City is a little, I mean, Shanghai is awesome, but it's a tough place to live.
Yeah, I believe you said that New York is a village compared to Shanghai.
Yeah, it is. Shanghai is, have you been?
No. It's
like, if you look at, like the Manhattan skyline, you say, wow, so many buildings. Shanghai is like 20 of those next to each other. And it's just, there's no skyline. There's just like kind of like sky square miles of buildings. And so you land and you feel like you're in a sci-fi set more than anything. But I haven't been in many years. I haven't been since I think 2019. So I know it changed a lot, but I'm desperate to go back. It's a lovely place.
I don't buy that. I feel like if without even going there, I feel like New York is the place for me.
I agree for you and for me. Literally, and I don't know if this is more information than you want, but literally the reason I ended up in Shanghai is because I went to grad school in Michigan. I was at Carnegie Mellon for a couple years as a postdoctoral fellow, and I was trying to find my next job, and I was trying to go to NYU New York because I wanted to be in New York City. I wanted to do comedy. I wanted to do circus. I wanted to do data, all this stuff. And NYU New York wasn't hiring, but NYU Shanghai was. And my original research was using natural language processing to track Chinese media. And so it made sense that I would go there. And so I thought, all right. So the reason I went there is I was trying to get to New York, and they were like, no openings, but Shanghai. So eventually I did find my way back. But yeah, no, New York is amazing.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
So do you have any questions for me?
Why are you doing this podcast?
I like to speak with people. It's like a selfish opportunity, first of all. Second is I like to speak to people who've done really great things in the fields that they're working in and just like learn from them. I have this, I only call people I'm curious about. I only reach out to people I'm curious about. So what you did and whatever anyone's come before or after is pure curiosity. And that's the way I learn, because even when I go back home, I edit this video, I listen to it twice because that's how I learn. And I'm just like, I used to be the annoying kid for my mom, just asking questions. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? So that's what I'm doing. She didn't answer all those questions, so I'm answering.
So now this is your mother's fault, is what I'm hearing.
I'm sorry, Mom.
Yeah, no,
She
I'm
watches
sure you did
this,
great. Yeah.
so-
Hi. No, I mean, and you're the ideal student is the one who would, find you after class or come to office hours and say like, oh, wow, you said this, but like it made me think about these 3 things and now I want to know about this and yada, yada. And if you're a student watching, professors love that kind of stuff. Don't ever hesitate to come talk to us about that. Do hesitate to come talk about why you have an A- rather than an A. No one wants to talk about grade grubbing, but do come with your curiosity. So you're an ideal student.
But I wasn't actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like
Why?
I did decent in school. Like I wouldn't say I was top.
Yeah.
I was definitely not at the bottom.
Yeah.
But I would never be the kind of person, only if I wanted to like butter up like the whole thing. I'd
No,
be
we
like,
see through that.
oh, what did you say about that? But I never really cared.
All right, I take it all back. But I will say, and this goes back to the whole, like, what am I measuring and what do I have data on, is that I am convinced, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this, that the students in my class who got the top, like, numeric grades, like got the A's and the A-, although the A- ones are still mad at me, but the A's, I'm not convinced that they were the best students in the class in terms of what I was trying to convey. Because I don't know how to test, do you appreciate the uncertainty of what we're doing? And do you know how to translate these complicated techniques into the real world? Could you turn something you care about into a data science question? Like, that's what I was hoping to teach students. But in an exam or a homework assignment, you can't really have them do that. Or at least when I did, it would destroy my TA's lives because the grading was way too hard. So it's just not practical, right? There's a lot of talk about, like, now that there's AI, students should come in for oral exams. And I would love that. I think I would get a great sense of whether or not a student is really understanding course material if I could talk to each one of them for an hour. But if I have 200 students, I can't do that. And making them talk to an AI feels sort of cruel. Anyway, all of that is to say that I don't know that having the top grades means that you were the best student.
The education system is broken. You heard it.
The formal assessment process in education is broken. I will for sure agree with that.
Totally. So as part of this, we're almost at the end.
Sure.
So as part of, like, we have a tradition in this podcast, the guest who's here, whatever they've spoken about, they leave an advice for the audience. So what would you like to leave today?
My advice is to, whatever it is, if you're trying to choose between doing more than one thing, like, oh, I really love this, but I should probably do a career in that, or I'm kind of good at both things, or I would have a lot of students, for example, who'd say, I love data science. I used to play the piano, but I'm not going to do it anymore because I want to focus on data science. My advice is do both things. And this sounds pretty rich coming from me because it's like, be like me. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you never know, and this is going to sound very Steve Jobs commencement speech, but you never know how your skills in random other parts of your life will end up helping you. So I think that, for example, my time doing comedy and my time doing circus have helped me do a better job of talking about data science to non-data scientists. I think. I could be wrong. And I wouldn't have those skills if I had just done only data science. And I think if I had only done comedy and only done circus and only listened to my more kind of, let's say, creative, artistic side, I would never have learned about how amazing it is to think about the world in terms of data and all the amazing things that we can learn and discover. Like, I would be missing a huge part of what it means to be human and ask questions about the world and understand them. So whatever it is that you care about, insofar as it's possible, I realize there are time and financial and familial constraints, but insofar as it's possible, don't waste your time trying to choose between things. Use that time to just do both, even if it's only a teeny bit of one or the other when you can fit it in. I know, I say, last thing I'll say, I wasted a lot of time in my 20s debating whether to go into the arts or science. And I ultimately, my non-choosing was my choice. But I wish I had just used that time to just do those things that I enjoyed rather than try to work out mathematically which one I should do. So that's my advice.
That is really good advice.
Cool.
So Andrea,
if you get fired for like doing burlesque and you're at a law firm, I'm sorry. I just want to say that the world is not ready for it, but I do think that it's worth doing. Yeah.
You could try it though.
Yeah.
So we'll leave all your links,
Cool.
everything, and you should definitely, if you're in New York, you should definitely go check out her lectures on Tap Talk. And thank you so much for doing this, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.